So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the structure. I'm going to give some introduction, some basic information about the candidates, and then they'll each have an opportunity to make an opening statement. That will be in alphabetical order. In the introduction, you'll notice some FEC data that I am presenting. That's from third quarter of 2017. The fourth quarter 2017 data is not yet released. The questions have come from people in CD2, in Congressional District 2. A lot of them were solicited ahead of time. And then also, we've been soliciting questions from you, audience, with the cards. The time when we would like to have all those cards handed in is by the end of all of the introductions and personal statements, okay? So we've got volunteers that are going to be going up and down the side aisles here, collecting the cards. And then we will have screeners over here organizing those questions for clarity, flow, topic, that kind of thing. So let's see, where am I? All right, timekeeping. Most of the questions are going to be 2-minute answers. We have a 30-second yellow card, and then we have a red card for time's up. Great. All right, so let's get started. You guys, all right. All right, so next is Craig Olson. Mr. Olson grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin and has worked as an investigator for the State of Wisconsin Public Defender's Office. He's 52. He earned a master's degree in history museum studies. In 2001, he, his wife Melissa, and their 3 daughters moved to Islesboro, Maine. On the island, he owns and operates a used and rare book business called Artisan Books and Bindery and runs the transfer station. He has served 8 years as a member of the Islesboro Planning Board and 3 years as an elected member of the Islesboro Board of Selectmen, and 1 year as the chair. According to the FEC, he has raised $78,629 so far. Your opening statement?
Thank you. Can you hear? Thank you for coming out. I'm just so excited to be here. This is great fun to be out and talk to people. And for me, this campaign really comes down to getting out in the communities and talking to people and seeing what their issues are and what solutions they might have. Living in a small community like we do in Islesboro, you know, your neighbor is not somebody who you always agree with, maybe politically, but you know at 3 a.m. you can call them and they're going to be there to help. And that's what I'm finding as I'm going around this community, I'm going around the 2nd District talking to people. It is unbelievable to me, the solutions, the suggestions for solutions that people have and how these regional economies are beginning to develop that we used to only think that we just had mills and fishing and lumber. And some of these regional issues that are coming up are things like boat building here in Belfast. And what we, in our community on the island, it's not only about, you know, we have a large summer community, but it's also about people who do that in the summer. They do lots of things to keep, you know, to keep the wolf from their door, so to speak, which is what we've done, had to do in our family as well. And so in getting out and talking to people, my experience, it's interesting, in our family is not different from other people. And be able to get out there and talk to people about what their real concerns are and what solutions they think would work best for the state of Maine is what I'm finding to be really the most invigorating thing about this campaign. And to actually see results in communities. I mean, with what's going on with the 3-ring binder through Maine, for me, the real issue is infrastructure, and it's healthcare, and it's getting people back to work, and also making sure our kids can stay here in Maine, whether that be through education in our community college system or our state university system. It is imperative that we build these regional economies and, you know, build the quality of life that we have in this state. It's a fabulous place to raise your children, and we want to have more children raised in this state.
All right. Next is Craig Olson, same question. What's your top issue and how would you plan to tackle it?
All these are fabulous issues, and you know, you want to tackle them all. For me, actually, the top issue, and it was one of the reasons, is the reason I got into the campaign. I'm not a single issue candidate, but for me, it's affordable health care. And I came to that simply because, as a small business person, raising a family, we struggled with affordable health care in my family. We struggled with a $10,000 deductible. when we were self-insuring ourselves and our family. And also then, and we were very fortunate with the ACA to be part of the ACA and have a $5,000 deductible, which was a decision we made based on our budget and our budget for our family and our budget for our business. Then 2 years ago, I got skin cancer. And, you know, that was a $2,300 bill. At the same time, the boiler went out in our house. And then we were getting behind. And the fuel oil, we were getting behind. And we were lucky where we lived that there's a community foundation that stepped up and helped us out. But most people don't have that. And in watching this past year, where we had this attempt, you know, the 3 times trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, having Congressman Poliquin voting to repeal the Affordable Care Act, we had people who were making decisions about topics that they had never had to struggle with. So for me, it's about affordable health care. It's probably one of the primary focus because that's something that rings true with me. As a businessman, if I knew what that health care costs every year, you could budget for it. But with the skyrocketing increases, it's almost impossible. So you're between a rock and a hard place. One of the first things I would do, and of course if I was congressman, yeah, I'd be 434 probably on the seniority list, but I would introduce a bill, and I would keep introducing it, requiring that everybody in Congress take the insurance that's offered in their state. If you've had to navigate that system, you would be making choices and you would be making changes. It would make your head spin how quickly we would have a healthcare system and a healthcare insurance system that worked for everyone.
Great. Great. Next question is for Craig Olson. You are in favor of some form of federal universal health care insurance program. Would you be willing to compromise in the short term to expand current access to health care, short of the universal coverage goal?
Yes. It's something that has to be done incrementally. I mean, you know, what was it Rahm Emanuel said, never waste a crisis. I don't think we're at a level of crisis where we could institute a system that simply was, you know, the next day it was there. I think it has to be incremental. I think you have to work with insurance companies. You have to limit the lobbying and the price gouging that's happened because of the increased drug prices and not being able to negotiate certain things. You know, the Medicare for All model is it's a good model when you talk about Medicare for All. It makes sense to people, but Medicare is a little bit different from Medicaid, and how the funds are distributed are different. So I would say a universal care system that is based in some ways on how we as a business, you know, 2.95% of salary goes to Medicare. So why don't we increase that to 6%? 3% from the employer, 3% from the employee, and everyone's covered, of everybody who's working. That's one of the ways I think that you could actually start to fund such a system and have a basis of care. I'm not asking for Medicare, and I'm not asking for the federal government to pay for Viagra. And I'm not asking it to pay for Botox. I'm asking it to give us a universal basis of care so that we all are healthier. We don't have to self-diagnose our children thinking, you know, is it bad enough I should take them in? What's my deductible? Can I afford to build that deductible? And so I think that we need lower deductibles that are universal, and we need a base level of care that everyone can afford.
All right, so this is a 2-minute answer, and you can each have a turn to answer this. All 4 federally recognized tribes in Maine are located in the 2nd Congressional District. Do you believe that these tribal communities should enjoy the same rights and benefits that all the other federally recognized tribes in the United States enjoy? As the recent Suffolk University shows, an 11th hour anonymous clause was inserted into the 1980 Federal Maine Indian Claims Settlement Act without the knowledge or consent of tribal representatives. This clause prohibits Maine tribes from benefiting from just such legislation unless they are explicitly named in the legislation. What will you do to address this injustice? And Craig Olson, same question.
Being fourth makes this a lot easier. I agree. Wholeheartedly. What I find reprehensible really is that the exclusion of Maine tribes from this bill and this language, and it's reprehensible, and I think that these Native people need the same representation across this country. I mean, why should we be changing things for the Maine Native peoples and not, you know, offering the same benefits that the other tribes across the country have? So, having lived on edges of reservations in western Iowa, it is amazing the issues, the problems, the opportunities that these institutions and these places have, and I want to see all people treated equally in the same way.
All right, lightning round. Ready? This is a yes/no answer. Would you support impeaching Trump based on current information? Let's go.
Right now, no, because I don't think the case has been made in the situation or in the court type of situation within the Congress that needs to be made.
Craig Olson. The Republican Congress has managed to deny, trivialize, and condemn climate change as a serious issue, and all the while insisting that jobs trump any consideration of this urgency. What would you do to help the conservation and repudiate those in Congress who continue to prevent any movement forward?
Well, I would keep harping on science, even though people don't seem to be listening on one side of the aisle to the science argument. But we cannot deny that our lobsters are moving north. They're moving to moving to cooler waters. We're having that issue, I know, out on the island and other places. The ocean acidification, I mean, it's all happening. The data is there. You have to keep hammering away at these things. And I think the unfortunate thing that's happened in the past few years that we've gotten into a mindset of everything has to be taken care of in the next quarter of the business cycle. And that is not the case. I mean, it has to be. We have to look at these things over a long-term period of time. We have to talk to both members of the aisle. And the interesting thing that I run into as I'm out talking to people is when you actually sit down and talk to people, it's amazing how many similarities you have and how many opinions that maybe at first you don't quite agree with them, but as you begin to have a conversation, people begin to admit that, yeah, we are having an issue. We are having an issue on the island with Lyme disease because of the tick population. It's getting warmer, and these ticks are living longer, and the lobsters are going further north. I had a conversation at the basketball game on the island the other night with our local lobsterman, and we were talking about, and he truly feels, and he's been lobstering for quite a while, that within the next few years, the bottom is going to fall out of the lobstering industry because of these lobsters moving. And he's going deeper and deeper as he fishes, as he's catching fewer lobsters. And with what's happening with Canadian lobstering and price infrastructure, he really sees an issue. So you have to keep hammering away. It's not going to happen right off the bat, but you have to talk to people about what is happening in their community. And I'm talking about people across the aisle, people who you're working with in Congress. What's happening in your community and having that conversation. It's not going to happen overnight. It has to be a slow, slow drip.
Thank you. All right. Next question is a question posed to each of the candidates. Jonathan, you've already more or less answered this question. It's about campaign finance. And the question by the submitter was written as, are you taking PAC money?
And I agree too. I mean, public funding for me, I really think is what we need for the federal elections. I mean, we already give, what is it, $3 we can check off on our personal income tax that we can contribute to a presidential election fund. I mean, I think we should have the same for federal elections for Congress. And PAC money it can be a really scary area because you sometimes don't know who's behind that money. And I agree with both Jared and Jonathan that I really want to know where that money is coming from. Who are the contributors? And if somebody like Ben and Jerry have a PAC, you got it. I'm on board. But something that's shady and we're not, you're not quite sure about. And no, it's not something I want anything to do with.
Guns. What does common sense gun policy look like to you at the federal level?
I grew up hunting with my father. I grew up on a farm, and hunting was just part of the fabric of the community. It was part of the fabric of our family, still is. I don't hunt now. We don't have guns in our house in Islesboro, and it's just, we don't hunt on Islesboro with guns. It's not allowed by the state. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I took all of our we have 3 daughters, and they were 9, 11, and 13, and I took them through the hunter safety course, and I went through it with them with the sporting club on Islesboro because they go to houses with friends who have guns. And I wanted them to know what was appropriate, what you did if there's a gun in the house, if somebody picked up a gun who shouldn't be picking up a gun. And they went through it, and it was a great experience for us. We don't have guns in the house, but it's there's a hunting ethos in Maine, just like where I grew up. When I grew up in Wisconsin, it was the same. It was hunting. What we've seen in this society is this really the kind of the spoon feeding of the protection mantra from the NRA, and I find that just reprehensible, the way that it is done and the material that they push out, and the fact that they're creating this culture of fear that behind every tree is someone waiting to get you. And so what they're really doing, the real thing about the NRA, it's not so much that they're advocating for hunters, I don't believe, or they're advocating for sporting people or people who are shooting trap, but they're advocating for the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers to sell more guns. It has nothing to do with personal protection. The scary thing, too, about last fall, I went to the Bangor Gun Show, and I hadn't been to a gun show in 20 years. I'd gone with my father about 20 years ago. What really chilled me was the fact that you could buy silencers. And then this past year, there was a bill, I think it was H.R. 387 or 1387, and it was the Hearing Protection Act. And it was the bill to allow the universal sale of silencers in all 50 states. And that's reprehensible. There is no reason we need that. We do not need bump stocks. We just, the NRA has gone well too far.
Thank you. All right. Would you call yourself a feminist? And what does your answer mean for your stance on reproductive rights?
Again, I think we're all in agreement. I am married to a woman who was raised she and her sister, who was widowed during the Vietnam War. Raised these kids. One went off to Pomona College, one went to Stanford, one's a surgeon, the other one's a museum professional. We have 3 daughters in our home. I would never say that I'm a feminist. I would let them tell you if I was a feminist. Now, we've raised our kids, we've raised our daughters to realize that they have every opportunity that any male, boy, whatever out there has, and to do what is right for them, and to not do something that would make them appealing or make somebody else like them or accept them. It's amazing. I have one brother, and I have a very large extended family. But when my wife was pregnant with our 3rd daughter, somebody said, "Oh, don't you want a boy? Don't you want a boy?" And I said, honestly, I wouldn't know what to do with them. Plus, we have all the clothes. So. Living in a house with 4 women is fabulous. It's been a great life so far, and and coming from a very matriarchal family that my wife comes from, it's unbelievable. And I also live in a community. Like some of these communities, people think, it's kind of like men think they run things. They don't. In our community, they don't. And I think that the key is that we have to make sure that everybody's paid equally for what they do. Whether you're a movie star and you get $1.5 million and your co-star gets $1,000 to reshoot some scenes, or whether you're working at the Island Market, or whether you're working at Dairy Queen, everybody needs equal pay for equal work.
The following. It's about rights for our LGBTQ community. I would like to hear about your position on their status in society and what you would do to protect this vulnerable community. Let's start with Craig Olson in the middle.
Thank you. I believe everybody should have the right to live however they want to live with however they want to identify, and that identification needs to be upheld. Very basic. I have a daughter who's at school in her college, and different colleges are dealing with different ways of how they deal with it. And her college says, however that person identifies when they come into their college, if they identify as a woman, we will admit them. No question, that's it. If that's how you identify, she goes to a women's college. So if that's how you identify, that's what it is, and we have to have protections.
Thank you so much. I would like to give a big round of applause. Thank you so much to Indivisible Waldo for hosting this, and thank you for the candidates. Great. There are some tables outside. People have information, and they're also collecting signatures, including for ranked choice voting, if that interests you. And this concludes our forum. So now there's an opportunity to mingle and meet out in the atrium. Thank you. Have a safe drive, and good night.